Murray. She's a certified mental performance consultant with a doctorate in sport and performance psychology. Whew! Not only that, but she's a semi retired 5-star groom, a gym owner, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt. Oh my God. And a lifelong student of motivation and mindset. I was so excited to talk to her after reading more about her. Every single like line item there on her resume, I'm like, this is the most fascinating person. So we're going to talk about a lot of things in the mindset umbrella today. One of the main ones being how to set goals that are really impactful to your progress and your achievements as an equestrian. But we'll get into all sorts of things. First, Tyler, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So tell us, give us a little bit of a background on yourself, because going from 5-star groom to where you are today is just quite the evolution. And I think you might even still do some grooming work. I know that you like author articles and work with people one on one. You do all sorts of things. So tell us what that path was like, and then what your day to day life is like today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm definitely like a slow motion multitasker, always kind of have been, always had my foot in a little bit of different things. A little outdated on the bio. I actually got my brown belt recently. So I'm two belts from blue belt, and I actually just also won the world championships for jiu-jitsu at purple belt. So
Oh
um
my God.
So I run a gym and I run my kids program there, and I just started teaching more of the adult classes as my knowledge has increased. And I own it 50-50 with a black belt. So I opened that as I was transitioning from grooming into mindset work, because I literally, like, the day I started working for Jennie, I started jujitsu. It was like a weird, like, started grooming for a 5-star rider, finally, like, wanted to groom at the Olympics, finished my master's degree in sports psychology, and also, like, got into jujitsu and kind of fell in love with this new sport. For me as a rider, as you can kind of imagine, someone that gets into sports psychology, I had a lot of riding anxiety as a young rider. I had a horse that was going prelim that I couldn't get around novice, and it just really ruined my confidence, ruined my sense of self. I gave up competition for, gosh, I think 8 or 9 years. I did a novice for the first time 2 weekends ago. I'm riding Jennie Brannigan's retired 5-star horse, Stella Artois, that I used to go all the
Oh my
places with.
God.
So yeah, so there's a lot. I'm like trying to organize my thoughts, because I'm like, I don't even know how I explain this to someone else. I'm very passionate. I'm very like a go-getter, and I just like to do a lot of things. So when I failed at riding, I was like, I'm going to be the best groom I can be, and always wanted to learn more about the mindset. So I wanted to get the highest levels of education in sports psychology, and ultimately was like, oh, I can kind of do that and step away from the grooming. I still love it. Like, I still help out in the barn when they need me, or, they're short staffed and they need someone to feed the horses in the morning. I'm always there. But it's been awesome to kind of transition and use all the skills I learned in the horse industry and just go running with them and find success in other areas as well.
Wow. Yeah, no, I can see why it would be hard to kind of organize that into something that is really clean, because you have your hands in different things really enthusiastically kind of at once. Right now, is the majority of your time spent at the jujitsu gym, or is there a portion of your time that you're working with equestrians or jujitsu athletes in, a sports psychology capacity?
Yeah, so my gym has like early morning classes and then evening classes. So like my mornings are dedicated to mostly my own training for my own competitions. And I actually get to go like be a student at my gym and do all my cross training, and typically get my ride in early in the morning. And then I do clients during the daytime hours. And then I'm at the gym at night coaching. And obviously like running the gym requires like management and emails and stuff like that. So I'll do that throughout the day, but I do anywhere from 4 to 8 client meetings a day, working on Zoom. And what's cool about being a mental performance consultant is because I'm not a clinical psychologist, I can work with anyone, anywhere. So most of my meetings are on Zoom, and I would say 90% of my clientele is equestrian athletes. I am also involved in um, MMA and combat sports and getting the word out of mental work in that capacity through the American Association for Applied Sports Psychology, but less of my clientele is directly related to that right now.
How cool. Tell me what drew you into jujitsu, and is there overlap, like personality type wise, between you as an event rider and you as, I would assume that's considered combat fighting too?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So, the point of jujitsu is like to submit someone's with joint locks or chokeholds, so choking people and breaking arms. But actually, Emily Hamill, the 5-star rider, breaking history with Barry, her wonder horse. We
Unicorn.
met at True Prospect Farm, Philip Dutton's farm. I was grooming for or grooming and vet teching for Kevin Keane, and she was working for Philip at the time. And we got together. We were like really interested in self help, improvement, mindset stuff. And she had listened to this podcast, and she's like, "Oh, it's like 19 goals for 2019. Like, let's get together. Like, instead of going out for New Year's, like, let's have a goal setting night with all the working students." And we got stickers and papers, and our 19 goals for 2019, like some of them were supposed to be challenge stretch goals, some of them were supposed to be easy check off goals. So my easy check off goal was to take a jujitsu class, like just take a jujitsu class.
Oh my
I
god.
I know, and it's like my life now. So I had always liked meditation. I liked yoga. I was like, martial arts. That's kind of like the next extension. I know there's a gym that has like free trial week on its window. And I went and they were like, "Yeah, you could probably be really good at this." And it's actually like a joke between me and my coach now to like look for horse girls that are upset with their riding, because I run into so many ex horse girls in jujitsu. Like I'll be on the podium, they're like, "You rode horses? I rode horses." Like, you got strong thighs, you've got the ability to embrace the risks and the intensity of the sport as well. So I actually think a lot of it does transfer over. And at the time when I started jujitsu, I was actually really interested in it from a body awareness standpoint. Like my proprioceptive awareness has never been fantastic. Like I'm not a naturally gifted athlete, and being a high level groom and working with the animals on the ground and doing a lot of lunging, I was like, "Oh, I think this is going to be really good for me." So I kind of just jumped head first into it. And then, yeah, now I'm a world champion.
Okay, first of all, there's not a more beautiful segue into goal setting than the fact that your 2019, like, easy goal was to take one jujitsu class, but also it goes to show that, like, one brave decision can shift everything.
Yep.
Or not, and just be a single fun experience, or, it could, and you just never know, and I'm so happy for you that that has been such a gateway into a really fulfilling part of your life, an unexpected part of your life. With that, let's talk goals. So, tell me, when it comes to setting goals specifically for equestrians, is there anything that's fundamentally different from, like, a business professional setting goals, or someone in another sport setting goals? Or is there a framework that's really applicable regardless of what you're going to apply it to?
So I have a couple like different thoughts on this, and I think the answer is like yes and no to applying it to other areas. The one thing that I will say is I feel like through my sports psychology education, I was always getting shoved SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, action oriented, realistic, time specific. And as I was going through, especially my mentorship process, so I had to get like about 400 hours of contact with clients and, under a mentor talking through things. I felt like SMART goals were so hard for people to set because what if my horse gets slain? Like what if I loses a shoe? Like what if that show gets rained out? There was so many what ifs that from a motivation standpoint, I saw people getting more frustrated and discouraged from setting those goals. I'm like, there has to be a better way to do this. One of my favorite sports psychologists, especially as I was learning the craft, was Dr. Michael Gervais. And he always talks about how you can only train three things: your body, your craft, and your mind. So I was like, instead of setting like such specific goals of, I want to get this score at this event on this day, and then like have the rug pulled out underneath of you. And I feel like people are always like, yeah, I'm on plan F right now. Great. Like the the path to plan F can be the same as the path to plan A if you break it down into the fundamental pieces. And that's physically, what does it take for us to be capable of that goal? Cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, strength. Like, do you have any injuries that you're working through? That's going to be a piece of your goal. Technically, is there something that you're working on for the skill set for your particular discipline? Are you working on a specific cross country jump, a specific movement in the dressage? Like, what is the stuff that you're working on with your trainer or in your training? And then mental, like, do you need to work on emotional regulation? Are you really nervous before shows? Do you need to like work on some of the somatic part of the pre-performance routines? Are you really negative? Are you thinking like in terms of what's going wrong instead of what's going right? And is that standing in the way of your goal? And you create this framework that, yeah, it's still okay to have an outcome goal. It's still okay to want to go win the AECs or have this other thing. But in the pursuit of that, if your horse goes lame, work on your physical goals, work on your mental goals, try to work on your technical goals on a different horse, like get really creative about it. I think the core of all of it is being able to ask yourself the question, am I working towards my goals in performance enhancing ways? And when you're in such a rigid goal setting format as the SMART goals, it can be really difficult to find ways to work productively towards those.
That is fascinating, and I've never heard that perspective. But it's so true when it comes to equestrian sports because, like you said, I mean, there's just so many variables that are out of your control as a rider, and it would be easy if you've set an outcome-based goal just to throw your hands up and be like, "Well, I didn't hit it because they're lame or because they spooked when I went down center line, and now I'm not gonna win the AECs," or whatever it is. I love that you have these different areas that you can work on that get you closer to that outcome that you want. So it's not like yes or no, black or white, you did it or you didn't. You can still be making progress on the things you can control. And I want to get into like a really action oriented roadmap to help people set their own goals and start understanding what it will take to make progress in those different buckets that you talked about. But first, will you tell me in your work with equestrians, what are some common mistakes that riders make when they're trying to set or reach their goals?
So I think the rigidity is one of them, right? Like trying to fit it into a box or trying to focus those goals too much on things that are outside of our control. So being able to really ask yourself and filter the question, like, is this thing that I'm going for really inside of my control? Dressage scores, for example, very subjective. They can range so much from show to show. So is that inside of your control? Is that even something that you should be directing your attention and directing your focus on? Another thing can be making goals that just add pressure and add anxiety, right? So if my goal is to just jump double clear in my show jumping round and then I knock a rail, well, crap, like what do I do now? Like that's, again, it's going to distract my focus, it's going to distract my ability to act and respond in the present moment. So really that latching on to unrealistic, which does kind of go back into the smart goals. And that's where I'm not like completely demonizing smart goals. I like the specificity. I like the fact that they're realistic, but just doing it in a different way so that you are more open to changing the plan as you go.
I love that. And I think it would be helpful to walk through like a specific example of a goal an equestrian can set and what it might look like. But before we do, tell me why, like from your performance psychology background, why is goal setting helpful? Is it helpful? Is there some sort of like science or data that you can share with us that will motivate us to set these goals and stick with them because they actually will be a useful tool for us to make the progress we want to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that goals serve three purposes. One, it's setting intentions, right? So, one of the biggest things that can change our ability to focus in the present moment is the expectation and the pressure that we're putting on ourselves. So, when you go back to some of these ineffective goals, I want to jump double clear, I want to get the specific score that's not inside of my control, that's not actually directing my focus on what I can do to be successful. So, really breaking it down and doing that inventory of these are the pieces that I can latch onto and that I can set my expectations up for success. Then, when you're in the moment, you can pull grounding cues out of your goal. So, like, if for instance, my goal for show jumping is to keep the rhythm and keep the balance. And I know that for this particular horse, I really do that with my lower leg, right? Like my lower leg is the key that unlocks everything else and comes together. I tell myself, like, lower leg around the corner. I make sure I check in with my focus cue. And then it can also help a lot from a like review standpoint. Instead of, oh, I didn't jump double clear. I had a rail. Well, why did you have the rail? Is it something that was missing completely from your goals and now you have to kind of go workshop and add something new to these goals? Or is it just more objective? Oh, my goal was to keep a good rhythm, keep a good balance, and I lost my lower leg through that corner and I had that rail. So it takes some of the I always hate to use the term take the emotion out of it because I never want anyone to suppress their emotions, but in a way, taking the emotional side of how we feel about not reaching our goals and bringing it back into curiosity instead of judgment.
I love that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Tell me, will you walk through with me, like, we can role play an equestrian setting a goal and talk through like what a good goal looks like, what a bad goal looks like, what pivoting might look like if something happens that's unexpected or, not in line with that plan A. And my hope is that people listening can use this to kind of follow along and set their own goals and do the checks on their own. Like, is this, did I write out this goal in a way that's going to be productive? Am I checking in ways that are going to be productive? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What situation or what rider do you wanna be? Like, what show are you going to, or do you have, like, a goal for your lesson or
I mean, since we're heading into the winter season, I know a lot of people, it's hard because people down south are heading into their show season and other people
Yep.
are like, putting everything away. I guess let's talk about going into show season because that's a relatable like time for people to be setting goals. Um you tell me what give me a scenario.
Okay, so let's do like, let's say you've got a show a month from now. Right? So you're trying to go novice. I would ask you, what's the main goal of that experience? This is going to be contextual. Some of my adult amateurs, the goal is to have fun. So that's
Mhm.
like great. Like make that the main goal is to have fun, and everything else underneath is going to serve that main goal to have fun. So what I would ask for, like, what's the main goal for this show? And I don't wanna get it this is where you can introduce back in, like, I wanna get my personal best dressage score. I want to qualify for the AECs. I want to fill in the blank of that outcome goal, but we're not gonna stop there, we're gonna keep going. So what would be your main goal for going novice be?
Let's say my main goal is to be in the top, like, maybe like the top 25% of the class, because that
Okay.
tells me that, like, even if the judge is scoring high or whatever it is, I feel like amongst my peers, I have been successful.
Perfect. Yeah. No, and I love that. And that's there's never going to be a right or wrong answer to what your desired outcome is. You're just going to pick a main goal, you're going to put it at the top of your sheet of paper. All right, great. We've got the main goal. So now based on your riding and your training, what do you feel like are some of the biggest aspects of like the technical side of sport that you're going to need to execute on that. Now, this is where we can get like a little bit a month out. I kind of just go 3 to 5 things that you're doing in general. If I'm meeting with someone the week of a show, I kind of have them go phase by phase and tell me 2 or 3 things for each phase. But for right now, let's say we're a month out, give me like 3 to 5 things that you think will really technically help you be the best that you can be, ultimately getting in that top 25%.
I think one of those things would be really understand and internalize what I am meant to be doing throughout my dressage test. So, like, what is the judge looking for in each movement? Is that a
Okay.
good
Yep.
one?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. Um, we're gonna how check that. So how do you
Okay.
do that?
Should we check it now?
Yeah,
How
let's
do I
do
do
it
that?
right now. Yeah, how check
Uh,
it.
I'm not meaning to pitch Ride IQ, but Ride IQ has playbooks for each of the dressage tests, and a judge goes movement by movement through. So to me, that's where my mind would go. Like, go to the playbook for my test and basically memorize what the judge has told me, so that when I'm memorizing my test, it's not just where am I supposed to be going, but what am I supposed to be doing, so that in this month leading up, I can run through my test with both of those things in mind. And then if I weren't using those playbooks, I think I would probably ask my coach, can we sit down together for 30 minutes and I'm going to write everything down and then study that.
Great. No, and I think that's a perfect example of like, here's the goal that I'm going to write down, and then here's the thought processes that go behind how I'm actually going to achieve that goal and what are some actions that I can take. I would also say that already from that technical goal, I would add a mental goal for you. And this is something that I would do collaboratively with a client, because to me, technical goals are things that you ask your trainer about. Physical goals are things that you're going to ask your PT or your personal trainer about. And then the mental goals are things that you're going to talk to me. So, hey, what you just said about thinking about what you're doing and where you're going, probably the hardest thing to accomplish in any show and performance setting. So, I want you to find time every week to do some visualization of your test. And so, instead of like running through your test and just making sure you know the movements, can you sit tall and can you think about what aids and cues you're going to use and practice that imagery? We can talk a little bit about if that's going to be bird's eye view or first person perspective. If you're someone that struggles with imagery, we would talk about maybe having some videos to use to help build that muscle and build that skill. But already you're kind of okay, like, yeah, that thing sort of trickles down into a mental goal. And then maybe you realize that in order to achieve those things, you're actually going to need to strengthen your lower leg because you don't have the capacity to keep your lower leg on through the whole test to support everything that you're going to need to support.
That's really cool to hear you describe the visualization aspect, and especially the different ways that someone can visualize depending on how their brain works and what works for them. Um, so that sounds great. So now I have 2 goals. Should I list a third goal?
So yeah, I mean, up to you. I think like it's definitely a process for people to understand, but ultimately I'm looking for at least 3 to 5 goals in each area. So what we would do
Oh,
if we want to, so you have a goal
right.
in technical and you have a
Got
goal
it.
in so it's kind of like this flow chart of like the main goals in the center, and here's all the goals that are serving my main goal.
Yes.
I think people get a little bit confused sometimes between the physical and the technical, but I like physical, add the word fitness at the end, and
Mhm.
injuries, right? So like if you have an injury and you're overcompensating, making some goals outside of the saddle for that as well, right? So do you need to have yoga in your schedule 2 times a week leading up to this show? Like what else are you putting in those buckets?
Okay, I'm tracking now, and to repeat back to you to make sure that I really am tracking.
Yep.
So on my sheet, I have my main goal, be in the top 25% of the class. And then I have 3 headings: physical fitness, technical, and mental. And
Yep.
you're looking for, under each of those headings, 3 to 5 like goals or efforts that will serve my main goal.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so we have a mental, let's say we have a physical, we're going to work on like lower leg strength. We
Yep.
talked about a technical. Would it be helpful? You talked us through the how check, which makes a lot of sense. So you have this goal to like learn what you should really be doing during your dressage test for each movement. And then the how is listen to a playbook or talk with your coach. Do that for each of the goals. Is there anything else that we should cover to make sure that people are doing this in the most helpful way?
Honestly, that's where I kind of take it into an individualized version, because some people
Mhm.
like are really like they like to write down training logs, right? So every day, like, can you write down something that served your goal or something that moved you away from your goal, even, right? Like, so increasing that awareness and increasing that. I'm an athlete, I'm busy. I have tried to start these journals a million times for
Mhm.
myself, and like I don't do, I like I do it more in my mind. So
Yeah.
thinking about like how to take that the next step further. But the biggest thing that I want people to realize is this is not a goal to write down on a piece of paper and then like shove that piece of paper away. Have that with you at the show, right? And again, I kind of talked about how sometimes with a client, if we're right before the show, we'll talk phase by phase instead of overarching. So you're a month out, you've got your 3 to 5 in each category, you pull that paper back out and you say, okay, now here's my 3 to 5 things that are going to help me be really successful in my show jumping. Here are the things that I think are going to make the most for my cross country. And obviously, like if you're doing saddle seat, you're going to say, like, this is for this class or this is for this horse. And then being really specific about that, having it as part of your mental toolbox. So is that something that you read as part of your pre-performance routine to remind yourself, "Oh, like, yeah, I have to sit up. I have to support through my lower leg in the moment of the test. I need to remind myself to breathe because that's one of my mental goals." So it's sort of individualized how people synthesize it from there. Not a one size fits all answer, but I would ask you to be really curious about how you can continue to utilize those both as intentions and reflections.
That makes a lot of sense. So once you've done this work, figure out for yourself how it's going to work best for you to check in with that plan along the way leading up to your goal. And then
Yeah.
in the week before or days before the show, when you're talking about like 3 to 5 goals for each phase, those are actionable things like keep the rhythm in show jumping.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier having a cue for yourself. Will you talk more about that so that when people are in kind of like the moment of truth, how they can be checking back in with these intentions?
Yeah. So, another function of goals is doing some of our overthinking outside of the saddle instead of doing it in the saddle, right? Peak performance really does live in the present moment and our ability to be open, react, and respond in the present moment. So, when I think of a cue word, it's more of an anchor to get my body to do what it needs to do, right? Like from a I'm going to get nerdy for a second, but from like a motor learning and performance perspective, you go to your lessons, like you think, you analyze, you're critical, you get feedback, and you are taking information from just your actual like processing system that's very active and very thinking, and you're putting it into your automatic processing system. So in theory, when we get to performance, we want our automatic processing system to take over. That's why I talked about the imagery as well. That's a really great way to take something from a thinking mode into a doing mode. The more that we image it, the more that we kind of blend the theory of thinking and doing and what do I need to do, where do I need to go, the better off that skill is going to be. So, taking that into keywords, I know I'm someone that gets really tight in my shoulders when I perform, right? I got tiny T-Rex arms. So like my shoulders tend to get really tight cuz like I've never been able to figure out how to bend my elbows and have my hands in the right place. So that cue for me might be shoulders back, right? And that's just going to remind me of, as I feel my shoulders creep up, they're going to come back. Keywords can also be based in imagery because sometimes that speaks a little bit louder in our brains. So, like if I told someone to jump, they might give me a little half-ass jump off the ground. But if I say, "Hey, I want you to jump," like there's a pile of snakes underneath of you, that elicits a stronger response. I forget who it was, but like years ago, I saw an article from the young rider camps with one of the trainers having them hold like fly swatters, and I'm like, I love that. Like, can you even just picture that you have fly swatters in your hands and see what that feedback is doing? Or if you're someone that does lean forward, can you picture your head being tied back? So those keywords can be very imagery and motion based, or they can be even things like breathe. Um, I know Emily Hamill, again, good friend of mine, she likes to say, be here now, right? Like, be here now. And that's like a good reset. So I think of keywords as something that can ground me back to a plan. If I get frazzled, if I get distracted, if I feel like, oh crap, like I forget where I am, can I anchor to something?
That makes a lot of sense because every rider can relate to coming out of the ring and being like, "I just blacked out." Like, I don't know why we are such different people in that, like, performance pressure, but having these keywords or images seems like a really helpful way to stay present and not let all of this stimulus around you kind of, like, take the reins and take it out of your control. And I really like that Emily's is be here now because of course that's like helping her be present and just do the job she knows how to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I obviously like I've done a lot of like producing content and videos on sports psychology and talking about this, and it really is hard because I do feel like every single person is different, and like
Yeah.
that's why I tell people when I work with them one on one, I say, "Hey, this is a soft science. Like this is not like a one size fits all." So I would love to give you exactly what your goals should look like. I would love to give you exactly what your keywords should be. But ultimately, like you have to understand who you are and what makes you perform best. And it's a playful practice. It's like, oh, like, did this work for me? Can I be like, like that didn't work? I know I've had performances where I'm like, well, that was really bad. And of course, I'm still like emotional about it in the moment.
Mhm.
But once I get past like feel it phase, it gets really interesting to be curious about how to fix it. Like, what did I do? Why was the pressure different there? Do I ride better or perform better when I'm having fun? Do I like to be a little bit more serious? Like, what is my individualized zone of optimal functioning? And then you're just kind of just channeling everything else to fit and suit you from there.
That is very cool. And I think that I would love to dig more into that, how to reflect and adjust and treat it like a scientist experimenting so that it's not, done and on to the next thing. You've mentioned visualization a few times and how powerful it can be. And I know this falls into the same category of like, you need to learn what works for you. Will you talk us through some different methods of visualization that you or your clients have used so that people who are listening can start wondering and maybe playing with which might be helpful for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is again like really like understanding yourself and understanding what you need, but I think there's a lot of pressure on visualization to just like think positively, right? Positive visualization, think it's going to be so good. And I actually think that can create a lot of cognitive conflict in our sport because things aren't perfect. Like you're riding a live creature, things are going to go badly. So in some cases, it's worked really well with high anxiety clients to actually have them picture the mistake that they're obsessed about making happening and then having them go through what they're going to do to respond to it. So like, hey, this is the worst possible scenario. Can you visualize yourself preventing that thing from happening? Can you visualize yourself doing some repair if it does happen? And that way you're almost doing like a little bit of a graded exposure exercise of, okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. Like, yeah, it's horses. Like, I'm probably going to have a long spot. I'm probably going to have a short spot. He might spook. Great. Like, what do I do? How can I sit up? One of the biggest things about visualization in general is the more that you can include your senses, the better it's going to be. So, honestly, like, I know it sounds silly, but if you're wearing your riding clothes, that's going to be a more effective visualization session than if you're like just sitting at home without like any exposure to horses. I know this can be counter whatever. I've had people come back at me, "That's not very mindful to do that while you're riding," but I have horses that are really good at hacking. So, like, when I'm hacking, I use that as an opportunity to do some visualization, obviously with safety in mind and not doing it if you have a horse that might spin you off at any moment, but you're, like, actually in the saddle and you can lock into that kinesthetic feel, and you can say, "Oh, yeah, like, what do I want it to feel like? What does it feel like when it's wrong?" In general, asking questions really does open up the experience. Like, how can I make this better for myself? But never pushing yourself to a point where you're getting frustrated. I would rather you do a minute of visualization when you have like an intrusive thought come in as a way to address that intrusive thought than sit for 20 minutes and judge yourself that you're not doing it right or that it's not going the way it should.
I am I mean, all of this really is blowing my mind, and in the best way, just because I haven't heard these approaches, and I love the idea of visualizing what could go wrong because I mean, in most cases, you are totally capable of, handling if your horse spooks in the dressage rings or stops in cross country, and it kind of like takes the power away from that event happening. Um, okay, I think I'm just thinking if we should shift to reflection now, which I'm sure is probably, like, the most skipped part of goal setting.
Right.
Um, but once somebody sets a goal and the event happens, what's your recommendation as a coach to them to either tie a bow on it or maybe, like, keep that goal with you and iterate on it? How do you recommend people take the next step?
So, one is the simplest way would just be to go back and say, what went well? Like, what am I proud of? And then, if there was something that went wrong, like what actually happened? And sometimes, again, emotional brain can take over, and it's just like, well, I suck, and that's why like I just suck, and that's why we had to stop on cross country, or I'm not good enough, and ooh. So you try to get out of that and say, like, what actually happened? Use your trainer if you need to. Like, hey, like, what went wrong there? And then again, revisiting your goal sheet and saying, okay, was that a lack of awareness? Like, did I not even have that thing on my radar? Great, that's going to happen sometimes. Or was it something that was on my radar that I now need to think about and approach in a different way and maybe transform my goal into something else? Another thing that I utilize a lot is an after action report. So it's actually a structured like reflection where you'll go through and say, here's what I was proud of from each phase. This was the outcome of each phase. This is what I was inside of my control, outside of my control. Here's some other factors that I'm not making excuses, but I just want to be aware of. So, was there weather? Was there trailer issues? Did my horse have a lost shoe? What did I learn from this experience? And then again, at the end, how do I want to adjust my goals? What do I want to keep the same for next time? Or what do I want to change and evolve? And what does like my practice and training look like in the next however many weeks between the next show?
I like that, and I like a lot of this sounds like, especially for someone who hasn't worked with a mindset coach in the past, it sounds like it would be very helpful to have some true, like, one-on-one guidance and accountability. But I think the guidance part is important too because it's not all intuitive how to approach this or what might be the best approach for someone. So for people who work with you on I'm sure some people are doing like just goal setting stuff, some people are doing overcoming fear stuff. Is there a cadence that works really well for this type of work? Is there anyone who meets with you like once before the big show, once after the big show, or is it important to be like regularly working with someone until you kind of are able to hit your stride a bit more on your own?
Yeah, so being a lifelong equestrian myself, one of the biggest things that I try to do in my practice is like never waste someone's time or money. Maybe not maybe not good from a business person perspective, but I really want to be authentic in my work. So I do give recommendations, but I leave it up to the person that I'm working with. I feel like if you come to me for like a problem, which is not all of sports psychology, right? I would say it's actually like 50-50 people coming with problems versus people coming with performance enhancement. If you come to me with a problem and it's like I'm getting over a fall, or I've got this specific show and I really want to tackle those nerves, the timeline really would be based on that goal. So, overcoming a fall, a 50-minute session every other week tends to be really good. I think like I do a lot of deep work in that regard. So being able to have the time to practice and reflect is really important for those athletes that are more looking at mindset skill building. I do inventories when I do intake. So like one's called the athletic skills coping inventory, one's called the sport anxiety scale. And not that like Likert scale measures are the be all end all, but it really just depends on the person how much work we have to do in building the mental skills at the beginning, right? Like, how self critical are you? Do you even set any goals? How are you with pressure and freedom from worry? Like, what do those things look like right now? And then, if that person's maybe like lower, we would do a similar thing where we're going to do an intervention. So, we might do a 8-week intervention where we meet every other week, and then you're gonna be someone that pops into my calendar before the show, after the show. So I have clients that I've worked with for 3 years. I have clients that come to me for a couple sessions and they're on their way. And then I actually also do offer, a more solutions focused hour. So, like, it's a little bit like I charge a little bit more for that, and I try to jam as much information of like, "Hey, if you're someone that wants to do this more self-guided, let's just touch base and I can give you an information dump, understand you, and then, we have the rapport that if you struggle with it, you can always circle back in my calendar. But if you don't want to be like a client and you just want to get some information, I try to do that work as well, for those that want it.
Okay, that's nice. There's different approaches for different people, but it's helpful for me and hopefully for listeners to understand just kind of like what the work actually could look like with someone's guidance. Um, okay, a curiosity I have, especially we're now into November, we're in the end of the year, and I think that this obviously is a time that's like really ripe for goal setting as we turn into 2026. And you mentioned that you and Emily did 19 goals for 2019, and some of those were stretch and some of those were easy. Do you have a thought on setting like kind of a list of goals at, let's say, at the outset of the year? Like what are your thoughts on New Year's resolutions? And can you help us if we're wanting to make a bigger list of goals versus the single goal that we're focused on in a more near term sense?
Yeah, and it's funny, I think this is kind of like for me personally evolved over time because like I did 19 goals for 2019. I think we did 20 for 20, and then obviously like COVID was like, whoa. And I did it for a couple of years. And I would say in recent years, that process has helped me get to a point where I'm just so confident in myself that like I enjoy the process and I enjoy the things that I'm doing, that the outcomes kind of come from there. It's funny that I won worlds this year because I think it's the first time I didn't have written down on a piece of paper I want to win a major tournament in jiu-jitsu. So I do think that is an evolution. I think it's really fun to have a longer list of goals, make some of them really specific, make some of them easy. 2019, one of my goals was to like finish a book, like not stop books halfway through, because at the time I had like 12 books that I was reading and I was a chapter into this one, a chapter into that one, and I ended up reading like 52 books that year. Emily and I ended up starting the Whole Equestrian podcast that year. That wasn't a goal on the list, but it was a byproduct of that mindset and that intention. So I think like if you are someone that's already striving, that's already very task oriented, that's already very focused, it might not be necessary for you to set that goal, but it can be something really playful to do. And again, we did it like kind of as like a friend group thing, and like let's set some ridiculous goals, and I honestly at this point I don't even remember if I achieved them all. But I have definitely become a different person because of those intentions.
That makes a lot of sense. Just kind of having this approach of personal growth, like putting those goals down on paper or taking the time to think about them. A thing like take one jujitsu class is the sort of thing that you might not do if you don't make space for the exercise. For people setting New Year's resolutions, I mean, everyone talks about how most New Year's resolutions are like abandoned or forgotten about by February or March or early in the year, whenever it is. Do you have suggestions for people who are feeling very energized about writing these goals down and making goals for a period like a year? Do you have suggestions about how to check in with those goals or how to set yourself up for success or habits that people could adopt?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, obviously, one of the things can be like daily habit tracking. So instead of setting some of those overall specific, like have your daily habits and you start with one at a time, right? Like, if you're like making smaller changes is better. And I think that is a lot of times the problem with New Year's resolutions, right? We're coming off of, wow, I just ate a lot of Christmas cookies and now I'm gonna not have sugar for the entire month. Like, is that realistic? Another thing that can be really, really important, and that's actually valuable conversation for the goal setting as well, is instead of setting specific goals, really aligning what your values are. So I'm a really, really big fan of values work because setting a goal is like putting a spot on the map, putting that destination, and you're just like narrowly focused, you're trying to get there. A value is something that we can constantly be working towards. So if I am that person who my goal for the year was to do a 3 star and my 3 star horse completely breaks down and now I'm back at beginner novice, well, the value of doing that thing is challenging yourself. The value is connecting with a horse. The value is x y, like fill in the blank, and you're still working towards those values. So I would encourage people to, if you're setting a New Year's resolution, like what is the value behind that? And I think the New Year's resolutions specifically tend to be focused more on the guilt of how we've just acted because of the holiday season than an actual value of what we're trying to achieve. Um, there's also a really interesting coach that I follow, Mark England, I believe. He's part of Enlifted Coaching, and he does what's called a soft talk challenge. So, trying to eliminate soft talk from your goals and from your intentions. Soft talk is statements like probably, perhaps, maybe, I might, I could, sort of, kind of, like that stuff. So I think, you say I will, and then it turns into the maybes and shoulds and staying away from that from a language perspective as well.
That's everything that you say is brilliant. I'm such a fan. Are there any resources that you can suggest to people to get their head around what their values are if they haven't defined that in the past? Or if not resources, suggestions like limit it to 3 or 4, or just suggestions to kind of keep them on track with an initial effort to define their values?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a values list. I think actually Ross Harris put it together. If you Google values list, like you should be able to see one. I'm a really big fan of one that actually like has the value defined as well. So finding one of those lists, mine has like 60, and you go through and just do a blank reaction. Not important, very important, somewhat important. And ultimately, you're narrowing that down to 6 top values. And I think as an athlete, your values should reflect your life values. So your horse values should fit into everything else that you want from your life. And this conversation is so important. Like if your family is your number one value, you might not take a working student position 500 miles away from your family because you're not going to be happy and you're not going to be satisfied. And even if the goals of being an upper level rider are very important to you, you're going to be constantly conflicting that value. You can realign values change with time, but I think doing an exercise where you find the values list, totally Googleable. Um, the other big resource that this work comes from is Dr. Stephen Hayes. He's the founder of what's called acceptance and commitment therapy. I use that a lot in my practice. His book, A Liberated Mind, I think is maybe a little bit nerdy. I think that's the one that's most geared towards the general public. It is more clinical psychology, but I think there's so much to how he talks about like the way that you should interact with your brain and the way that you should think that is so powerful. I actually got to meet him this year in person at like a conference, which was amazing. But that's those are my biggest values recommendations.
Okay, amazing. I find it so interesting because, like, every job that I've worked at, we've had very clear defined company values, and it makes it so easy to have a North Star and to make a decision because you're like, well, clearly this is in line with company values. And doing that work on a personal level is just incredibly underrated and it's just, very powerful. So I'm glad that you suggested that and directed people there. Let's talk about something that is just really common in the riding community in general, which is having an injury and then being on the path to recovery. Because I think goals look different when that's what you're navigating. I'm sure that you come across this a lot with your clients. Do you have suggestions for people who are sitting in that space and maybe they're not thinking like I want to be in the top 25% of my class at a show, but I want to, get back to myself, but I have this huge kind of like unknown hurdle in front of me?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be another one that sounds counterintuitive at first, but I promise it makes sense at the end. I start those people instead of setting goals, I have them set their fears. So I have them tell me, like, what are those intrusive thoughts that are coming up? What are the feelings? And I think it's so important because there's so many instances where our equestrian culture has told us nobody cares, keep working, hospital or on, like you should be able to work through these things. And everything that we know from a physiological and psychological standpoint, from injury and fear and recovery, is that when a physical injury occurs, a mental injury also occurs. So you're having to navigate both the physical limitations, which ding, 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 you're not going to be as safe on a horse if you're not physically 100%. And then also the mental hesitation. So, what I see a lot in those athletes is it's not just the fear itself that's the problem, it's the guilt and anxiety related to the fear. Right. So, oh, like I should be able to just get back on. I've ridden at a certain level and now I'm like shaking at the mounting block. So, normalizing that, it's actually helping them define, okay, well, what are these fears? And then let's talk about what are the benefits of working through these fears. And that's how we start to shape goals, is how can we understand these fears and unlock them and target each one of these things so we can get you to a point where you are setting goals again. The other thing that I would say on the goal setting side of things is being okay with taking the goal way back, right? Being okay with the fact that an injury is going to knock the balance of your challenge and skills. So what I mean by that is, even though you in theory have these skills, the injury takes your skills down, whether realistically or just mentally, right? Because we're going to have a mental block and we're not able to go to that automatic processing system. It's literally a cog in the machine that you're going to have. So setting goals of, I just want to like walk today, and even if someone has to lead you around, like normalize that kind of stuff, because that rebuild is so important. And nobody looks at you after you take your horse off of stall rest for 6 months and ask why you didn't have a jump school the next day. But you come back from your broken bone and they're like, oh, like you're not going to the show? What do you mean you're not going to the show? And again, I love our role models in the sport, and like, yeah, you badass 5-star riders, you keep on kicking on. And I work a little bit differently with the upper level riders than I do with the amateurs. But when your goal is to have fun and enjoy it, I think it's a lot of different processes that go on.
So when you're defining fears with people who have had a physical injury, is the purpose to, like, again, visualize what that would be like and how they would respond to it? Or, like, what are you getting at when you define the fear? Like, the fear is that he'll spook and I'll fall off and re-injure my arm or whatever it is. What's what's the end point of that?
Yeah, so defining, and then we were going to talk about the prevention. And what the prevention does is it usually tells us how to ride better, right? Like if I'm afraid my horse is going to spook, then I need to make sure my head is where it needs to be. I need to make sure my inside leg is on. I need to make sure like I'm keeping my horse's attention and focus on me. So what it does is it takes these abstract like uncertainties and finds things that we can be certain about, like especially from a fear context. One thing that our brain hates is uncertainty. So bringing some more solidified, like, yes, okay, well, I can prevent it through X, Y, and Z. And you start to pull out different actions that you can take as well. In any circumstance, there's going to be things that make you feel the fear and trigger that sense of danger. So, our goal is to extrapolate what is going to actually help you feel safe. It can be as simple as wearing a safety vest, even when you're flatting. It can be as simple as like having a mantra that you tell yourself, or it can be a little bit more complex of I'm really having a lot of these intrusive thoughts and I'm struggling to get back to the prevention. So in that case, again, bringing the challenge skills balance down so low that it's almost boring so that you can work your way back up.
Got it. Okay. So identifying the fears helps you address them in a way that brings you to a point of safety, feeling safe.
Yes. Yep.
Got it. Um, okay. Let's I would love to end with just a couple quick lighthearted questions. One being, you're the perfect person to ask this to, but one being, will you challenge listeners to do one small thing, whether that's today or this week, but what challenge would you put out to listeners?
I would challenge you to find like a mistake that you made in your writing and find something that you learned out of that. That can be a really quick like mindset shift to say, here's this thing that I'm beating myself up about. I'm having my negative mental filter telling me it's the worst thing ever, and try to take that and ask yourself what you learned or what you could do better next time, because that's a mental rehearsal of getting yourself in a better direction. And it's not even necessarily about thinking positively. You'll hear me, I'm like never one that's like, yeah, just think more positively and everything will be okay. It's just, are you doing helpful thoughts or unhelpful thoughts?
Cool. Okay, I love that challenge. And the next question, you mentioned one book so far. People love book recommendations. So, are there any books that you recommend on this topic, or even not, just books you love and you would recommend to anybody?
Yes, I love books. I think I read 63 last year. I read a million this year. Honestly, The Inner Game of Tennis is one of my favorite sports psychology recommendation. And there's like only a couple places where like not knowing anything about tennis will affect the read, but he does a really good job of talking about blending what you're doing, like where's your focus at, like can you get in the moment, can you experience flow. So that's probably one of my favorite sports psychology books, Liberated Mind by Stephen Hayes. And then actually, like for those of you that deal with like sticky thoughts, there is one that's called The Illustrated Happiness Trap, and it's a cartoon easy read version of like how to deal with the thoughts in your head, which is so underrated. I think we should teach more people how to do it. And then I'm also going to throw out watch Inside Out 2, because that is my doctoral dissertation in Pixar form.
Oh my gosh, how cool. I only saw Inside Out 1, but I've heard Inside Out 2 is amazing.
There's a lot of sports psychology in that. She's like playing
Cool.
hockey and stuff. So,
And I wanna buy Illustrated Happiness Track, like, I'm gonna do it right now. So, one sale. Okay, lastly, where can people find you in general, and if they want to work with you?
yeah, absolutely. So Emily and I had started the Whole Equestrian podcast in 2019. It is not very active right now, but my the website is still active. So if you go to thewholeequestrian.com slash sports psychology, there's a whole page about me and my practice. You can actually schedule an intake session on that website. I do still post things occasionally through at the Whole Equestrian social media page. My business is called Thought Quest Solutions, and my email for that business is simply thoughtquestsolutions@gmail.com. I'm going to be totally candid and honest here of like not being a good business person. I don't do a ton of marketing. Most of my clients are through word of mouth. So there's not a ton of like internet places. I do have a blog on Eventing Nation called Between the Ears. You can find me there. And I do a lot of stuff with Coach Sando, who I know has been a guest on here as well. So I'm part of his high performance team and some of the work that he's doing as well.
So cool. And I needed that reminder that you're on Coach Sando's team, but now it's coming back to me, and something that you said along the way, I was like, this is so in line with Coach Sando, which there you go. I love it.
I
And
well, and I love like his high performance program like works on nutrition and mindset
yes,
and then the physical, and I'm like, if you want physical and mental and then like you've got a good trainer for technical or like you've got another technical way to come in, it is awesome to be able to work in that capacity where I already know like physical limitations are not the problem that we're having because it's being addressed.
totally. Man, okay, I love it. Well, I Coach Sando, I have him on such a pedestal, and you're up there with him on the pedestal now. So I'm so happy that you guys are, working together, and it makes so much sense that you guys are working together. But what a cool collaboration, and good to know those places that people can find you. I'm really hopeful that you hear from some Ride IQ members, and Ride IQ members, if you are listening and you find a way to work with Tyler, please let us know. It would just be fun to hear about your experience. Tyler, you taught us so much in an hour. Thank you. You're such a gem and such an expert, and I feel really lucky to have been able to learn from you. So thank you for taking the time to share all of this information.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to everyone for listening. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.